Medicine has evolved from beating sick people with rocks to vaccines that have eradicated entire diseases and managing us to come back from the deadliest epidemic in the last 100 years in a matter of months. We tell you that the new rise of distrust caused by New Age wellness and other practices undermining science have brought smallpox back to America after it being eradicated for 100 years. We tell you that we here in this debate stand for human lives and the preservation of our mental health. In this speech, I'm going to bring the frame and then two arguments. Let's begin with the frame. We tell you that the definition of the New Age wellness here is things that are not without scientific backing. We tell you that those things could look like, I don't know, all of the things mentioned in the info slide, but also like mental oils, etc., psychology books, and without psychologist backings, and self-help books. No, thank you, not that. We tell you that those alternative methods often do not work because they firstly are not tested by actual medicines, actual scientists, and actual companies, and secondly, they are usually based on belief. They are based on you believing that it can help you, and then when in the lucky case it does help you, you believe it further. We tell you that the burden of proof for proposition in this debate is that the damages have been worse than the benefits. In our speeches, we have the arguments. I will bring you the first two about physical and mental health, and in our second speech, we also will tell you about scams. Before I move on.
Things like meditation and mindfulness have hundreds of studies backing its science. This means that New Age wellness is not about things that don't have scientific backing, but rather this new prevalence focused on things like self-care and self-improvement. It does have scientific backing. How do you engage?
We tell you that even if some parts of them do, it is how you interpret those things. We tell you that you cannot have physical determined impacts from meditation. It can help you in some ways, but we tell you that people are less likely to connect them with actual medicine and with other practices that connect them to crystals, etc. And this is very important in my speech. Okay, moving on to the first argument, trust in actual medicine, how it can cause physical harms on side opposition. First, we tell you that trust in scientific medicine decreases on their side. We tell you that alternative medicine seems very, very trustworthy. First, it is also sold by big pharma, which legitimizes it in the eyes of those users. Secondly, it is also not banned, which we usually do with things that are negative to you or which can cause harm. Therefore, we tell people that it is not that bad as it might seem. And thirdly, we tell you that the advertising by those big companies is very, very strong, very, very effective, and done in a very large amount. Since this type of selling is mainly based on quantity over quality. We tell you that those people, or since those medicines and those methods don't cost a lot, those companies are relying on people buying a lot of different ones and buying a lot of ones over and over again. Therefore, they are relying on people buying. Secondly, we tell you that those are presented also very persuasive. We tell you that the influence can come from parents or friends or through social media. All the things that are very, very persuasive for the average user. We tell you that especially a susceptible group here is children who are very, very much influenced by social media or what their parents grew them up with, etc. And lastly, we tell you that there are also social bubbles forming in Facebook or Telegram where those people constantly have reaffirmation that those things actually do work, even if they don't, or they will get proof of things working that even that won't work, and they won't get the actual scientific proof that they might cause harm to you, etc. We say that this causes a snowball effect because even if it works one single time, you're more likely to believe in the system. We tell you that they can work in some cases. First, you might just get lucky. Then, there might be environmental cases or things that make the disease go away naturally, or the issues go away naturally. And secondly, there are other things. For example, you can get vitamins or things from your food that can fix the diseases. You still connect them to the alternative medicine or to the New Age wellness. We tell you that now you're more susceptible to the other reasonings behind them. You're more susceptible to those advertisements. You're more likely to be persuaded by your parents or your friends or social media. Therefore, now you're a lot easier of a target. Therefore, we tell you that even if in some cases they don't work on you, you're still more likely to believe on them, and you still believe that they might work in the future. And lastly, we tell you that companies also really spread propaganda on the topic. They really want you to have this trust into scientific medicine because they want you to use the alternative ones instead. They get profit from you using it. And this means that most people are going to be, or most users are going to trust actual medicine less, or scientific medicine less, because first they don't have that much resources. You're probably going to buy only a single medicine, either it being scientific or alternative for a disease you have. Secondly, you either don't believe it or not. We tell you this has two major causes or negative impacts for your health. Firstly, you suffer for a longer period of time. Let's say that as you have this experimenting time or period, as you only get sick, you try those crystals, you try out all new ways of doing it, even if you return to scientific science in the end, you still have this period of time where you suffer and where you don't get help. We tell you this is very, very critical, as some diseases are very treatable at the start. For example, cancer is completely treatable in the first stage, but as it evolves further, it is no longer treatable. And if you, during that first stage, don't seek help from science, but you try to use crystals or alternative medicine or medication, then you might not be able to be cured at all. And secondly, if you don't seek help at all because you don't trust actual medicine, then you cannot actually have those like exponential growth and symptoms and issues, and it may not be never known yet. And secondly, side effects. We tell you that a lot of those issues or a lot of those alternative medicines can actually cause your health to go worse. We tell you like drinking MMS or like drinking different solutions that are promoted through those systems are very bad for you. We don't tell you that all of those cases can cause that, but we tell you that some will. And you're more likely to use them due to the snowball effect, that even if those like safer versions of meditation or crystals might work, you're more likely to use the like more radical ones in the future as well. And secondly, we say that you can also mistreat your body by not eating different things or distracting your immune system and destroying it, which means that you're also more susceptible to different diseases that are not connected to the current one. Therefore, we tell you that a lot of actual issues will return to you, and you will have a worse physical health in the long run and in the short term when you use those. Now, moving on to the second argument, we tell you about mental issues. First, we tell you that the approach of those New Age wellness medicine is very individualistic. We tell you that these look like, self-help books or like beliefs that doctors are only there to harm you. Only you yourself can fix those issues, or like the third one, like your actions are the things causing your illness. For example, you not meditating is why you have a cough or why you have depression. We tell you that this kind of result in massive harms in two different ways. Firstly, when you actually cannot do anything about those issues and you think that you are the problem. We tell you this looks like people having depression or people having anxiety, etc., but they still think that they can change it on their own. But at the same time, they're not able to. We tell you that this is a very bad situation for those people because they will be stuck in that eternal loop of making themselves feel miserable because they cannot fix it and it's their fault. We say it can cause further damage, for example, and it can also cause further damage like anxiety or depression, which can come from the medicines you actually are using to cure them. Secondly, we tell you that isolation is also a key point here. We tell you that those are people who won't seek help with anything now. Those are people who believe that they are the sole reason that they're sick and they're the sole answer to those problems. We tell you that by having this individualistic approach, you are less likely to talk about your mental issues and also you're overall analyzing every single other issue in your life. We're talking about like you getting fired, but you're less likely to talk about that to your significant other or to your friends because you think it's on you, it's your fault, etc., and you are the one who's supposed to get over it. This means that we create harms on every single level. First, we tell you that those issues are less likely to be solved as if you catch your partner cheating, you're less likely to confront them because you think it's your issue and you should overcome it. We tell you that this means that you additionally will blame yourself eternally for those issues because you are the sole reason for it, and as those issues don't get solved, you have mental damage. And lastly, we tell you that those effects also affect other people around them. If my significant other who uses those methods does not tell me about their problems, I'm less likely to tell about my problems on them as well. Therefore, we mean that those mental issues are going to deepen in the world, and we have less help and less people seeking for support. For all those reasons, proposition there.
The current reality is one where humans face issues on a daily basis. Issues like anxiety, depression, and insecurity. Issues that may seem small but make your life all the much more bleak. We think that New Age wellness culture provides people with a breath of fresh air, accessible, personalized solutions to your problems, but not only solutions to your problems, but also active improvements to your life. With that, we are so proud to oppose. Before I go into my arguments about New Age wellness being good, and even if the culture itself isn't good, the fact that the ideas that it promotes is good, I would like to go into two pieces on framing. Firstly, what does the implementation of New Age wellness culture look like? Note that this frame is completely going to cut down that entire two arguments. Firstly, we think that this New Age wellness culture and the rise of it means that there's massive competition. So only the best forms of this culture will arise and become accessible. For example, if they're really scammy crystals, they're not really going to gain traction and get support from the public. The ones that are going to rise will look much more like the meditation that actually helps people. But secondly, we think that this culture exists in a sea of counter-narratives. We think that there are two counter-narratives that this culture has to contend with. Firstly, the fact that hospitals feel that this culture is a threat to their scientific legitimacy. So we think that these hospitals and scientific institutions will also have an incentive to promote their own medicines. What that means is not that many people are going to be washed away into this new age wellness culture. People will still continue to opt into hospitals to some extent. No, thank you. But secondly, we think that the degree to which people opt in will not be extreme. This is for two reasons. Firstly, we think that it is simply counterintuitive to human nature to buy all of these claims that these new wellness culture promotes. Because if people probably won't believe that one healing crystal will solve 14 days spent in depression. People won't think that one crystal is enough to solve your whooping cough, or if you're vomiting, people are not likely to buy into stupid things. Secondly, we think that, other generations, find these new ideas kind of skeptical. So parents will still make their children go to hospitals if they're suffering from COVID-19. So the implication of this is simple. Individuals will still opt into hospitals if they really, really need to, if they have a physical illness. Notice that this cuts a large chunk out of their entire case. Note also that this doesn't undercut our argument, and our argument will stand independent of this. But the second piece of frame, what does the absence, or what does the world that opposition has to defend look like? At the point in which we do not get any characterization from proposition side, we think that it is reasonable to assume that no such narratives of self-help will exist on that side of the house. With that then, onto my first argument. The new age wellness culture in and of itself is good. There are 5 reasons for this. Firstly, no thank you. We think that the benefits of new age wellness culture will allow, the people will be allowed to choose and be able to pick and choose between the benefits of wellness culture. Because there's a rise of this culture, there are simply more videos and more tips available on the internet. What that means is that people can pick and choose what best fits them. Obviously, if you do not find healing crystals effective, that means that you can just simply opt into other means, such as yoga, that will actually help you maintain your mental stability. The second reason is that you can uniquely solve micro issues that you don't have to tell anyone, or that you won't tell anyone on Proposition Well. This looks like being self-conscious before your WSDC speech. This looks like being anxious about your exams. This looks like being anxious about whether your boyfriend is caring about you anymore. Note that these are not huge issues, so that you won't want to bother your parents with, or you bother your friends with, and can only be solved by yourself, or you don't have an incentive to tell others or ask others for help, or that you'll be embarrassed to ask others for help. Rather, on our side, at the point in which you can read that book in your own room, you can, about self-help, and get these tips, you'll be able to solve these issues on your own. But thirdly, we say that you can solve these subjective problems that only you can solve. This looks like, for example, just being insecure. We think that stuff like insecurity can only be solved through self-examination. You have to ask yourself problems like, why do I feel insecure? What are the best ways to combat the deep-seated conceptions that I have that led to this insecurity? Obviously, this kind of issues is something that only you can solve. We think that we can uniquely solve this on our side at the point to which you're able to read self-help books and watch these videos and internalize these tips on how to get better and process how you fix yourself. No, thank you. The fourth reason is that you simply have increased accessibility to solving your problems and getting self-help. We think that there are many problems that you have on a daily basis that pop up very unexpectedly. This looks like having an unexpected fight with your friend, or suddenly getting nervous 20 minutes before a football match. On that side, you simply cannot go and access these self-help because you can't call yourself to a hospital 20 minutes before your match, right? No, thank you. We think that on our side, comparatively, you can take out your phone in that locker room and watch a 5-minute video on how to not be nervous and how to help yourself. That is unique to our side. But fifthly, we say that you're able to improve yourself and not just fix your problems. This is important because of mainly 2 things. Firstly, we say that stuff like hospitals and therapists only solve your problems and only solve your problems after the harm occurs, right? After you fail that job interview and get severely depressed. Rather, on our side, we're able to preemptively make people immune to these kind of problems. At the point in which you watch self-help videos on a daily basis about how to deal with failure and internalize that failure isn't bad, when you fail that job interview, you'll be able to deal with it much better. But the second impact of this is that no one teaches you, or no institution really teaches you about how to make yourself better, right? About how to tidy your room. It's not something that is taught by other people and other institutions on a daily basis. Only self-help books are able to deal with this. On to my second argument then. Even if the self-help culture in and of itself is harmful and unhelpful, we think the ideas that it promotes are good. We think that there are three reasons for this. Firstly, because self-help culture actually promotes you to care about yourself and to care about your own mental health. That means that you defy the capitalistic narratives that exist in the status quo that tell you to work hard, to work 24/7 constantly. What that means is that you'll be able to take a day off work to be able to look after yourself, even if you do not opt fully into the culture in and of itself. But secondly, we think that people are more likely to opt into institutions and therapists and hospitals on our side of the house. Because people now uniquely know what depression looks like. They know through their self-help books that staying in your room for 15 days isn't normal. That means that on our side, you can uniquely actually make yourself realize that you're suffering from a problem and cut yourself to therapy. Thirdly, we think that a lot of things that have been stigmatized, such as depressed people, will be able to decrease the stigmatization against them. Historically, we think that stuff like mental health has been very stigmatized simply because people and the general public don't know about it and don't understand how important it is. However, on our side, when you get influencers talking about how depression is a real problem that you have to solve, you get normalization because these narratives exist. We think that the stigma against the most vulnerable then decreases on our side, which allows them to access help and access help from their friends. We think that because we are able to provide help for the most general public and for the most vulnerable people, so proud to oppose.
Dear panel, oneself is of utmost importance, and when faced with our mortality, when faced with our well-being, we do not act as rational actors. We are more open to things that are promised to us even when there is improvement, because the idea of not being sick anymore, the idea of not being in pain anymore is definitely worth it. We tell you we have to safeguard against the worst possible case. Let's go over the frame very quickly again, and then look at the two arguments we just heard, analyze our material that wasn't rebutted, and then a third argument about scams and how they gain so much more power, or have gained so much more power. The frame, what do we hear from that? First, it tells that there is competition on the market now, which means you don't really have all the bad products, and secondly, that there are counter-narratives being run. Let's first look at the competition. I think this is a false characterization because of what we actually frame to you in proposition, which is how people get this information. This isn't like an open market competition, because a lot of this firstly is based on fake research, that people can lie about the products and still get people to buy it. And secondly, since this info is received from different sources, i.e. internet media, i.e. things that aren't fact-checked, there are often problems with it, right? We tell you that the basic market competition doesn't apply here, especially when people trust on belief of it working and the perception of it working a lot more than the fact that it actually has to work for you. Secondly, they tell us about counter-narratives, but we tell you that once you have already bought into this, you are already to a certain extent desperate and want it, and secondly, they never actually respond to our analysis on how a lot of this information is generational, and your belief on this can be generational. If your parents teach you that moonstones work, then you're going to grow up thinking moonstones work, and you're going to want to believe that they work, thus you are more likely to consider them work, and you are less likely to opt into other things that work. They never rebut anything that we tell you, dear pal, because we tell you that yes, there are a lot of situations where you might have good benefits. We think that in general, meditation might be good for you, but I think the most important thing here is when a person does have cancer and doesn't go to the hospital, but someone legitimately dies or has the worst impacts realized. That is at the core of this debate, because those are the most severe consequences. They have to answer that. No, let's talk about their arguments first. Firstly, they tell us about the access you have to it. A few important answers. Firstly, yes, Firstly, there's a barrier of entry, right? I think once you have gone over this entry, you're probably in there, we're going to be more stuck in it. Because when you are doing this, when you can try different moonstones and different yogas and find what legitimately works for you, every single time you try something that doesn't work for you, you are going to continue being in pain, or your condition is going to worsen. I think this timing is incredibly critical, and if the other chance we have is you legitimately going to a psychologist, you actually getting chemotherapy, we are always going to prefer that, because you aren't going to go over that a critical point where we can still help you. Secondly, they tell us about there are problems that only you can solve. We don't legitimately agree with this. I think a psychologist can help you very much. I think they can help you discuss things. I think if you're insecure, they can start helping you find the reasons for that insecurity. I don't know why a 5-minute YouTube video is ever going to be more legitimate in helping and understanding a person's mental state than a professional who is trained for 20 years in specifically understanding mental states, what decisions lead to something. Especially when you have personal contact with them, when they can actually help you. A 5-minute YouTube video is always going to be impersonal and doesn't correctly engage you, right? Secondly, they tell us about daily problems under this. i.e. the fact that you have specific situations where you don't get access to that, and these YouTube videos are the best. Firstly, I think you can call a therapist when you really need one. A lot of services provide this already. But secondly, I think asking help from others isn't a bad thing. That's exactly what our second argument tells you about. We should be asking help from others because there's nothing inherently wrong with relying on others for support when you need it, right? For more benefits. I think uniquely on their level, when you're constantly blaming yourself for every single problem that you have, you consistently think that you are the only one who can actually deal with it. That is when you stop asking help from others. That's when you believe that asking help from others is not okay, and that's when you stop actually receiving the most important benefits, i.e. the mental support that you need when you are depressed. They never rebut any of this from our claim. I think that's so incredibly important for the purposes of this debate. I'll take that away.
Can you explain two things? One, why cancer has anything to do with this debate about self-care and self-improvement? And two, why the conception of not being able to ask others
okay, 2 points in a POI, right? So basically, why is cancer about this? Because in the info slide it says alternative medicine. We tell you moonstones are alternative medicine. People believe that cancer can be solved with moonstones. It's very directly, it's very important. In fact, they cannot only tell you about yoga, right? Okay, then they tell you that psychologists don't work because you only go to a psychologist once a harm has occurred. That's the exact same thing with alternative medicine and other things. You don't start doing yoga when everything is fine. When something is wrong, you are depressed, you start looking for things to solve it. That is completely symmetrical. Lastly, they tell you that psychology doesn't teach you how to be better. We completely do not agree with this. I think that a psychologist does also like how to, in every single day life, be less anxious about things. Thus, you're always going to be better in situations. The second argument was about ideas and that even if there are potential harms, then opting into this is really good. Right? Then they tell you about, hey, you don't work 24/7 and then there's a side stigma. First of all, working 24/7, I think we already scientifically also say that we shouldn't be working 24/7. We have a lot of analysis of why it stresses you out, why it's too much work. Psychologists all say that a 4-day work week is far superior to a 5-day work week. I don't think this is in any way completely unique to New Age wellness. Right? Secondly, they tell us about stigma, but we simply say they make stigma worse around mental health and mental well-being because there's now a stigma that you cannot ask for help. They never about this, as I say again, which when you can't ask for help, when you go and rely on 5-minute YouTube videos and hope that's enough, then in those situations where it isn't enough, which we tell you it often won't be, especially when you have a really significant or dire situation, in those situations they always lose. Okay, third argument, let's talk about what are our direct harms that we claim for that? Firstly, less people getting legitimate help. Every time you use a moonstone, you are going to the doctor. Secondly, there's more false info moving around. These companies are motivated to spread false info, as every person who doubts in the medical system is going to use their products, thus they get more customers. Secondly, family and friends are also spreading this false info because they also believe that it's true, thus they want you to use it because they think that it's going to help you. Thirdly, you miss the critical point where you can get help, i.e. if cancer reaches the 4th stage, it won't be curable anymore. Thus timing and going fast to the hospital is legitimately very important. Fourthly, you have mental harms, i.e. you are going to blame yourself even if you can't do anything about the situation that you are in. And fifthly, you are going to always be less open to outside help because you think you're the one who should be dealing with this. There's also an auxiliary harm here, which is the fact that your family also feels really bad when they can't help you and when you shut them out and don't share your problems. Okay, let's talk about scammers too. Because I think alternative medicine and other new age wellness has created a unique market for scammers. 3 reasons. Firstly, people are willing to pay a lot for it because it's directly to do with their health. In the same way, secondly, they're really open to anything that you promise them. They're willing to accept a lot of doubts that they would regularly have. And thirdly, a lot of this stuff isn't scientific proven. Yes, yoga does have some things that show that it can be good for your brain's gray matter, but there are a lot of things that aren't scientifically proven. What does this mean? Firstly, that there's a race to the top where more and more ludicrous claims are being made. It can start with, oh, yoga makes your brain memory better, but then it can reach the point where again, moonstones can cure cancer. Secondly, more and more money is taken away from the average person because they are paying large amounts for this. Moonstones can go up to 500 per stone and you need to recharge them every week. And thirdly, more propaganda is actively being spread. These scammers are really motivated to start spreading this information because again, it brings more money to them. Thus less trust in the medical system, thus less people actually going and getting the real help they need. Why is this super problematic? Because these scammers are always going to sell something that's fake, that never works, right? Why is this true? First, because they don't actually have the knowledge on how any of this works, and they don't actually understand how to make something that could cure cancer. And secondly, they aren't motivated to actually cure you, because when they keep you sick, that's the point where they gain benefits. They want people to keep coming back. Because if you're depressed and get a stone and it doesn't work, then they have a built-in propaganda system where they say, you need another stone, or it's your fault that it didn't work this time. Thus, people are going to keep coming back to that system, because they keep hoping that something is going to help. Because when you are in as horrible of a situation as you often are going to be at the worst points of your life, then anything that promises to fix it is worth a try. We tell you that people should go to the hospital, not get a moonstone. Thank you, opposition. Proposition.
Proposition brushes off legitimate remedies for serious issues, and this is the meaning. Just because you cannot physically see change does not mean it does not exist. For the fact, my friend was suicidal for 2 years, and books like 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson, meditation, and self-improvement content has changed his life. But it's not just that, right? It's the breathing exercises that Natsuki does before rounds. It's the videos Hiroko watches when she's stressed. The accessibility of these things only exists in our world. I want to deal with top-level clarification in this debate, which will largely cut out the majority of the absurd claims that you get from proposition. Then I'll delve a little bit into the specific clashes. Firstly, on top-level clarification, there are 3 things of note I want to make. Number 1, these are real remedies. That New Age wellness, to some extent, has to exist on a spectrum. They cannot brush off the entirety of New Age wellness as something that is unrealistic, not scientifically backed, and just completely wrong. Rather, a lot of the things that do exist are actually factually proven. Meditation and mindfulness have hundreds of thousands of papers backing up its usefulness. Self-help literature has saved multiple people from the worst forms of suicide. Therefore, New Age wellness exists on a spectrum. Second clarification. What does our world look like? What we tell you is a fairly nuanced theory of what our world looks like. Because we do agree, to some extent, things like moonstones and healing crystals, we do have to defend that in our world. But the things that do gain the most prevalence in this debate, and the things that are the most used in our world, are still going to be things that have somewhat effective remedies. The mechanization we gave you for this was competition. And proposition, brushing this off by talking about fake information and different sources, doesn't change the fact that, for example, things like reviews create checks and balance systems, which means still, the best forms of most effective remedies still make it to the top. I also want to note our second piece on framing that proves to you that there exists a lot of counter-narratives within which this culture does exist, means that we can cut out the majority of the extreme characterization you get from proposition. Because this debate is about the manifestation of this culture in society. And the manifestation is crowded by other counter-narratives, which means the most extreme forms of this still are mitigated. We proved to you, for example, the incentives of hospitals that feel delegitimized by the New Age wellness and their active incentive to propagate ideas that limit things like alternative medicine and healing crystals that are ineffectual, and rather to push things like meditation and mindfulness. Therefore, these counter-narratives still do exist, and therefore the most extreme forms of this debate are still out of the scope of this debate. Go ahead.
In some cases they work, in some cases they don't. This debate comes down to the metric. We tell you that their wins are very, very small when you get a little bit better concentration, etc. But we tell you that every single child who dies of cancer is a massive loss, therefore the damage is always a lot bigger on our side.
Right, 2 things. First, I will engage to your entire claim there later on in my speech, but also secondly, I did want to note at the top of my speech that I think claims like cancer and a lot of these physical diseases that proposition wants to debate upon is just not part of this motion. This motion is about self-care and self-improvement, colloquially terms used for mental health issues, not physical health issues, which means we do not support the promotion of moonstones alongside for like solving cancer or whatever. I really don't think that's in the motion. Okay. What was our argumentation in this debate? We proved you 6 independent reasons why the colloquial forms of medicine that exist in proposition's world only is ineffectual. This was not to say that things like therapists are bad. This was not to say that we are in any way better at doing our jobs than professionals, but rather that these supplemental sources fill in the gaps of professional support. What was our mechanization? We firstly proved to you that we are able to pick and choose what works. That for some people, sitting down in a room and talking to a therapist is something that they cannot do or they're unwilling to do. Maybe you're too embarrassed to talk about your issues. What we allow for then is you can choose alternative forms. Maybe talking to a therapist is too hard, you can watch a video. Secondly, we talked about smaller issues because going to a therapist to some extent does cause money, which means you're unlikely to want to do that for things like stage fright, which you feel is unimportant. We uniquely fill that gap. Thirdly, we proved to you ideas of things that can only be solved in our world. We told you by yourselves. For example, the fact that you are nervous to come on this stage is something that things like breathing exercises can effectively deal with. Fourthly, we talked about accessibility, because I cannot just call my therapist in Japan and expect him to pick up at 2 a.m. in the morning right now. But what I can do is turn on a video about breathing exercise and access that immediately in a second. Our fifth thing was on retrospective versus preventative remedies. That at best what their role does is deal with issues after they have happened. That yes, after I get depression, professionals, great job at doing that. But to prevent depression, I can do mindfulness exercises every single day. That is a preventative measure that does not exist in their world because people don't go to therapists before they're depressed. And sixthly, that there are unique learnings that only exist in our world. That therapists don't do things like tell you to clean your room or to tell you how important you are that uniquely exist in things like self-help literature, which means uniquely in our world there are actually different learnings that professionals do not cater to. Proposition's responses are a lot of things. They firstly tell you professionals are better. Again, we do agree. Professionals are better in some regards, we're just better in other regards, and they do not cater to this demand. Then they tell you that, oh, you can just call a therapist. I think I engaged with that. And then they finally tell you that therapy is effectively able to tell you how to deal with daily life. There are two problems with this. One, people don't actively approach therapy in a lot of situations. Like, I did not go to my therapist because I am scared to speak in front of you. That is not something I am willing to do because I don't want to pay $100 just to learn about stage fright. But I can turn on that video and learn a little bit about it. Just 3 more seconds. But also secondly, that I don't think that therapy is also actively going to do that for you because they focus on big picture solutions. Like yes, talking about it will help, but so will small-scale mindfulness exercises. Yeah, go ahead.
They never apply to or compare them on mental issues. They either need to prove to you how you can solve everything like anxiety and depression on your own, or otherwise mental issues grow massively when you don't seek for help with anything and you try to focus always on fixing everything yourself.
Professional institutions exist in our world, people still go to them in our world. Therapists still exist in our world, people will still go to therapy in our world. Our second argument was also massively important and very lowly engaged. We tell you that even if these ideas are harmful in and of themselves, the ideals that it propagates is massively important because it leads to a self-help movement that means people care about themselves. The proposition response is, well, science tells us, sorry, I can't take any more POS. Proposition response is, oh, science tells us that you should care about yourself. The problem is, this science only happened for 2 reasons. One, because there's increased demand for this science, that people now view self-improvement as important and therefore are more willing to research it. But also secondly, even when that science exists, the only way the general populace has access to academic papers is if this movement exists, which means our argumentation is prerequisited on science happening. But I also want to note that they don't explain anything about our second and third argument mechanisms in this argument. I think that, for example, individuals who face stigma is important. I want to finally engage with their argumentation on things like misinformation and scammers that exist. 2 things. 1, there's very little incentive to do this because individuals need return usage, which means even if you were to be able to sell moonstones the first time, people are not going to come back. It is incredibly unlikely that you do so. But also secondly, I don't think that the capacity to do so is there as well because there exist things like checks and balance systems. For example, the Federal Medical Agency actively does crack down on alternative medicine that is ineffectual and is actually harmful for the human body. There exist review systems for YouTubers online, which means YouTubers cannot propagate harmful beliefs without people having checks and balance. Now, what proposition will tell you is that these YouTubers, these ideas are coercive. The problem with that is that coercion cannot beat fact. That the fact that individuals know that these do not work is going to be the thing that they incentivizes this. In our world, we believe that the new age wellness culture has led to individuals and their mental health massively benefiting. For all that reasons, propose. Thanks.
At the point where a mother suggests to her child that their breathing issues might be caused because of a working Wi-Fi router in their home, before even considering the possible psychological effects, at that point, the child has been faked. Even if they go to a doctor later on, all of the anxiety that has been internalized within themselves becomes so much more difficult to cure. We're so proud to propose. Firstly, on clarification. Secondly, on first level perception of mental health. Secondly, on physical health and alternative medicine, because the influence does include it as a part of this debate. Firstly, notice that proposition second speaker concedes that an individual is not better than a professional. However, what we have been telling you throughout our own case is that in a situation where you individualize all of the issues, you're less likely to go to that professional in a situation where you do need help in which you yourself cannot help you. Firstly, because you're stuck in an info bubble. We do believe that in a situation where you enter the new age wellness community, in majority you get your information from social media, because this is not something that doctors often prescribe you. In that situation, the algorithms constantly feed you that information. We tell you that you won't get out of it, thus you're more likely to try more approaches in that community. If they don't work, we tell you that before you're even going to go to a doctor, you're going to try all of those more radical versions. So firstly, it's like mental oil to deal with your sinuses. In the end, we tell you that if you have been infused within that info bubble for long enough, we tell you that you are likely to also try the new studies we've been telling you. Secondly, because of peer pressure. We think that in a situation where the society thinks that you yourself have to deal with issues, you're much more likely to give in to the peer pressure of being able to deal on your own, to be self-dependent, and ensure that going to a professional is your last resort. Jude then says that therapists are ridiculously expensive. We agree fully. But the minute the society has taken a stance, the individual has to deal with issues on their own. They're not going to use the other completely free thing, your friends. You're not going to call your friends because you think that you have to deal with them alone. The question in this debate is not always whether you can solve issues on your own. The question is whether you should. Sometimes it's easier to share an issue without really going to the first clash on societal perception of mental health. Two stakeholders in this question. Firstly, an average person. Secondly, the one who has mental health issues. Firstly, let's talk about an average person. This is what opposition one characterized as having insecurity, some type of relationship issues, or stage fright. We tell you that those issues absolutely can be solved on their own with time. We're willing to concede that. However, we do think that it's easier to solve them with additional help. Firstly, because it's difficult to fix things alone when you are suffering already. We tell you that people live in a society with others. You can rely on those people because they can bring you additional benefits. Moreover, for example, a friend can notice you being anxious so much earlier than you can, because you're likelier to sort of push those bad feelings away, because your brain simply doesn't want to feel them. However, your friend can see that your hand is trembling or your voice is shaking and notice it and tell you that beforehand. They can ask you whether you're okay, they can offer you help. Notice, in our side of the house, in a situation where it's more likelier that you're not the people or the society doesn't believe that you should deal with those issues on your own. It's much more likely that the friend will offer you that help. However, it's always so much more likely that the one who is suffering will accept that help. Meaning that in a situation where we're dealing with daily life issues, we tell you that you can get benefits from others helping you. You don't have to take care of those issues on your own. The explicit way here is that firstly, you're able to detect the stress much earlier when you have an extra viewpoint, and secondly, because you feel better about yourself at the point where you have some type of extra validation. Meaning that other people also tell you that WSDC is in fact scary, and you're entitled to feel insecure, and this is not a you-specific issue that only you have to solve because there's something wrong with you. What does this way prove? Even if all prove that you can solve these issues alone, we tell you that it's much more easier and effective to do it on our side of the house. The second stakeholder that opposition has not engaged with a lot are the people who have more deeper issues with mental health, such as depression, ADHD, or anxiety. Notice, these are the most vulnerable people in this debate. They're the most susceptible to any kind of criticism from the society. For example, when they do gather the courage to ask for help from their friends, and they're given a self-help book by Jordan Peterson, 12 Rules for Life, they won't read it as a help, but they read it as a sign: we don't want to help you. You are the issue. You have to deal with those issues alone. But notice, you can't deal with those issues alone because your brain chemistry is simply different. Isolation is the worst thing that you can do to yourself. In that situation, you're going to internalize all of those fears. Notice all of those issues become so much worse. Even if you in the end decide to go to a professional, where you have spent a month alone with those issues, it becomes so much more difficult to cure. It becomes so much more difficult to actually get better. The way here is that the best case from opposition, we tell that the radical damages are worse than the benefits on the daily stress, or believing that you should care about yourself simply because of the intensity. Because we tell that for some, depression is a life or death situation, and not reaching out because you have been told to deal with it on your own can mean the worst option. Before going on to physical health, yes.
We've proven countless times why the most extreme forms of this culture are limited due to counter-narratives existing, meaning even if your parents promotes moonstones to you, you going to school and learning about the ineffectual nature of alternative remedies means you don't opt into it in the most extreme ways. How do you think?
Firstly, the bubbles that I already talked about. Secondly, because I do believe that some children believe their parents more because this is simply the contact that they get the most. Thirdly, is they know that there are different spectrums, and we already conceded that and already mitigated that as well. They also have to consider there are different spectrums. They should also deal with our material. Let's talk about physical health. Opposition barely answers to the alternative medicine that doesn't work. Notice that we need to concede that it can relieve some type of symptoms. For example, inhaling menthol oil can unclog your nose for a short amount of time. However, it never calms down the inflammation in your sinuses. However, you do believe that it worked because one, it made you feel a bit better in a short-term amount of time. Secondly, because it changed things. We tell that the important nuance here is that every success story pushes radical people further into their info bubble. These are the people who won't vaccinate. These are the people thanks to whom today we have cholera back because the immune systems have been compromised. Secondly, it is so much more likely that people try it again, when alternative medicine again, when they have a worse illness. We tell you that in that situation, even if you go to scientific medicine later, it also takes longer to cure whatever issue you got, because the issue has gotten worse. For example, you have to take antibiotics for a much longer time if you do have bronchitis, because you tried menthol oil earlier, but it actually didn't help with the issues that you have. Hello? Those radical harms are not that far away as opposition tries to present. These are regular people suffering on a daily basis. We've never been more proud to be those.
I watched Rio Hama, who teaches me about how to cope with stress and about mindfulness all the time. But that does not mean that I'm blind and dumb, that I believe everything that she says. I go to the hospital, I still believe in science, and I know when meditation may not work. For a proposition to say that many people are so naive that they will be indoctrinated by this culture and is so demeaning and simply ungrounded in reality. I want to talk about three things. First, on characterization of age wellness culture. Secondly, on hospitals and science that they want to talk about. Finally, on personal subjective matter. Before that though, I want to make three clarifications at the top of my speech. First, let's look at the proposition's case thus far and ask you if you find their case truly persuasive. Because their case essentially say, well, when you watch a video of mindfulness of a YouTuber, you don't trust science and mindfulness, and like people with cancer will simply not go to the hospitals on our side of the house. This is like simply insane because they never explain all of the incentive why the companies are so persuasive and powerful do not apply to companies that are selling the medicines that exist symmetrically on either side of the house. Because the mechanism of their first argument on why self-help culture are so coercive and persuasive, about how big pharmaceutical companies are strong, about how corporations' advertisement are strong, also applies to companies that are selling the medicines to begin with, which has meant that I think them saying that this culture is persuasive is symmetric, insane, and are a euphemism for also saying that big pharmaceutical companies who are also selling the medicines are also persuasive in the same manner. So all of their beautiful incentive analysis are not going to be the reason why, uniquely, why this culture is going to be persuasive for them. But even if you don't buy that, Judge, I think our responded to characterization was about how other generations simply do not believe it, about how this is counterintuitive for me, which is why I think even if the individuals do opt into it, they are not simply blind, that they are going to be indoctrinated by everything what those influencers or the companies tell them to do. And they say, oh, there's information bubble. Two responses here. Firstly, schools, governments, there are a lot of other institutions and authorities that tell them about how important those science and hospitals are. And importantly, they wanted to talk about children, but those children are actors that still has not opted into those kind of things that they say is coercive, which has meant that they have some sort of like still open mindset about which is actually good or not. But secondly, I think precisely for the reasons why they themselves give as to how these things are harmful, as is the reason why there are a lot of the information about how these things can be harmful, which is why individuals are capable of making an informed choice on our side of the house. Secondly, they say asking help for others is actually a good thing. But that is a straw man, and that wasn't our point. Because our point is that yes, asking help for others is actually a good thing, because there are certain issues and things that people don't like to tell others because of the stigma and how embarrassing it is that exists in the status quo. This looks like you being nervous before speeches like me, but you don't want to say that because it's simply embarrassing, or you being quote-unquote depressed, and those things are apparently a small issue and therefore you are unlikely to actually tell others. Our claim in our side of the house was simple. When you have this self-help books, for instance, when you have those mindfulness, one, you are actually able to actually solve the things on your own, but insofar as I think these kind of books, for example, or actually getting experiences from past people who have similar problems with you, can be like individually collected, i.e. you can buy the books, right? But secondly, I think it normalizes you asking help for others on our side of the house, because people internalize this idea that depression is normal, caring for yourself is important, which it acts as a counter-narrative against things like capitalistic mindset or you needing to work all the time, which has meant that when they talk about how asking for others is important, it is on our side of the house where we actually get the normalization of like having the environment by which we enable people to ask for others in the first place. Finally, they say that this is not going to work because this is scientifically bad. One, Seiji tells you that this is untrue, that mindfulness actually works. But secondly, even if this is not scientifically true, I think people perceiving it to be scientifically true, or people perceiving it to be actually good, is actually in itself a good thing. Because I think in fact, mindfulness and the solace that you can get as a result of it actually do benefit you in its unique ways. For example, you not being nervous anymore, or you actually being able to try harder because you understand that you need to actually like self-improve yourself. Before I move on to the first class, I'll take a POI.
Deep mental health issues can mean feeling anxious before eating. If you have actively dealt with all of your issues on your own, what is the incentive to finally admit something to your friends or otherwise?
I really didn't get that POI, but if you want to talk about like the serious diseases, I'm going to talk about in my class, don't worry. Firstly, let's talk about the characterization of this culture. Because what they are saying is that companies will tell you that you are the problem and you will blame yourself. I have like two responses. Firstly, I don't know what kind of self-help books that they read in this debate, because like the thing is, like obviously influencers or companies want people to buy into their services, right? Which means that they have the maximum incentive to make sure that these individuals who are reading are not going to be like feel so bad or feel so sad in the first place, which has meant that on incentive, this is simply not true. The implication here is that this is not a tension, because we think that they will spread the mentality of needing to improve yourself without actually spreading this sensation that you are bad, right? You should be blaming for yourself, right? You are going to tell them that you can improve yourself, and here's how. Secondly, even if some books and some influencers are bad, it's still unresponded to characterization we tell you about from first, because that these culture, insofar as this creates overflow of information, even if there's some things that are bad, the good things and the good products are going to gain prevalence on our side of the house, which has meant that people will be able to pick and choose the good ones, which is why their case at this point in time is not standing already. Let's then talk about their path to victory on science and hospitals. Their claim here is that barrier to entry to hospitals is too high. Exactly. This is our claim. That is why people don't go to hospitals on their side of the house for a few reasons. Like about how for example, people perceiving depression to be too hard, and therefore this is not going to be actually connecting to the reason why you will go to the hospital. Incredibly, on our side of the house, we flip this and tell you that we actively tell them that you must rest and you must actually get the mental health help, and this is the reason why you are going to go to hospitals on our side of the house. But secondly, if the barrier to entry is high, that characterization is the symmetric characterization, ladies and gentlemen, which has meant that I think it is simply disingenuous for their side of the house to simply discredit all of these kind of self-help culture, because there are some sort of things that are actually useful to you. For example, about how you cope with stress, for instance, which has meant that if you cannot go to hospitals on either side of the house, at least the type of help that you can get on our side is the things that you can actually get from those books, which is why I'm weighing on the most higher number of individuals, we are also winning on science. Finally, on personal issues, our claim was really simple, that there are certain things that are personal that you actually do not tell to other people, and you actually see yourself and rationalize yourself that this is not worth going to hospital. This looks like your relationship issues. This looks like you getting bullied. This looks like me getting nervous before school. This is why I think for those things, insofar as actually get the books or the YouTube videos where you can actually easily see and easily use that to help yourself, which is why I think on those personal matters, you are able to actually get the individualistic approach, which is easier to actually get an R set of the house. Here's the weighing then, 2 pieces of weighing. Firstly, on quantity, right? There are simply numerous amounts of things like personal issues unsymmetrically on either side of the house. Uniquely through this culture, we cater to them. But secondly, on vulnerability, because we told you that there's a lot of people who are like depressed in the status quo, who are told that they are stigmatized, that they simply cannot go to seek for help. But our side of the house, insofar as this is a personalized approach, we're actually able to actually like approach and like appeal to them, which is why I think our argument stands at this point already. For all those reasons, op-ed true.
I want to do 2 top-level clarifications before getting into the mess that was this debate. Firstly, what is this culture and what does its implementation look like? I think that we gave you 2 pieces of framing, and although there is some lackluster engagement, I think that at the end of this debate, these 2 pieces of framing in some way does stand. One, that to some extent this self-improvement sphere is in nature competitive. That there are hundreds of thousands of YouTubers creating content, which means the few YouTubers that are successful are the best YouTubers. But the fact that there are thousands of books being published every year means that the books that do gain popularity are ones that actually impacted people's lives and that the editors approved of. The implication being that this competitive landscape means that the most effective forms of remedies are the ones that do drag people into this. But also secondly, but the second thing about what this looks like is that there exists counter-narratives, and I'm sure you've heard this from all of our speakers. But the reason why these counter-narratives are important is because it does cut out a lot of the problems that proposition does want to outline. That even though there is an information bubble, you're not going to access it because there are counter-narratives. That because the YouTuber tells you that because there are people, advocates for actual science, you're not going to believe that health crystals are real. That's why everybody in this room knows health crystals probably does not work. Let's talk about mental health then. I had a second piece on clarification. The second piece on clarification is generally just to say that the proposition faces very, very low delta. All of their most extreme forms of harm, egregious harms, individuals looking at the fact that they have cancer and going, oh well, I probably need to buy health crystals. Those types of individuals are symmetric in this debate. Those type of individuals are still going to go and actively find these remedies. Those types of individuals don't need this culture for them to actively involve themselves in this. What this debate is about is us. It's about normal people. It's about people who are stressed in their daily life. And it's about these people who don't actively seek out things like therapy that this debate has to be about. The extreme forms of these harms are symmetric. The dumb people are always dumb. Let's talk about mental health. About mental health, I want to firstly note that I don't think the characterization of the mental health issues that may occur in our work are as extreme as proposition makes it out to be. One, because the info bubble is untrue. We've given you a lot of analysis on things like counter-narratives, governments, schools, textbooks, medical papers that you can actively access to make sure that what you're consuming is good. But secondly, they say, well, you're going to do it in desperation. But we don't see people do this, right? We don't see people like fall into a fit of, oh my god, I need to buy health crystals and I need to spend thousands of dollars on whatever because I am about to die. Like, this is not that big, that this is not grounded in reality for the majority of individuals. Maybe extreme people do exist. Secondly, about asking help from others. This is their main claim, telling us that you're unable to ask help from others through our world. 2 things. 1, this is just not a unique claim to begin with. Friends noticing your anxiety is largely symmetric in this debate. But second, we flip this. It's better in our world. You're better able to talk to people when books tell you that that is an effective remedy for solving your situation. Finally, their claim on self-blame. No, right? No book pushes you this. How would this go? Oh, it's all your fault. You should just give up. Like, that's not how it works. Self-blame is not the methodology by which self-improvement is done. It's rather telling you that there are small improvements that you can do in your life to make your life a lot better. Start by cleaning your room. That's the kind of advice we promote. Let's talk about our argumentation in more detail as well, though, because our argumentation is actually pretty in-depth. That is not entirely engaged to by proposition. For example, the fact that we have preventative remedies rather than retrospective remedies, or the accessibility of these things, because calling my therapist is not something I can do right now. These are real things that can only happen in our world. Finally, and very quickly, on physical health, two things. One, this is out of the scope of this debate. I don't think physical health is massively impacted by self-improvement content in any single way, but also secondly, that these harms are likely not that extreme in this debate. That individuals who have cancer probably resign themselves from cancer, and if they are to die, well, there is no delta. That is pretty harsh, but there is no delta. Sorry. Thanks.
Psychologists exist in both worlds. No quote encapsulates this debate better than what second opposition told you, because they admit that you need psychological help. In my speech, I'm first going to tell you why you never opt into this help on their side of the debate, and then why the most important people in this debate never get the help that they need. Firstly, about opting into help, why you never do it. Firstly, because of the massive amounts of false info that tell you that hospitals don't work, therapists don't work, psychologists don't work. Why is this info spread? Because these companies want you to use their services, YouTubers want you to watch their videos. We tell you that very simply, they are always going to beat Big Pharma because they have a race to the top. We explain this in our second argument. The bigger the claim that you have, the more likely people are going to watch it. If you claim in your 5-minute video that you can solve depression, then people are going to go to that video. No Big Pharma company can claim that they are going to solve depression overnight or in 5 minutes. Secondly, we tell you that once one person believes this info, it is very likely that this info is spread because you are motivated to tell your friends and family about it because you want to help them and you believe that this is the thing that is going to help them. Thus, there is a massive amount of distrust in the system that legitimately works. You are always going to opt out. Second reason you opt out is because of the stigma that is now going to surround it. Because they tell us that we're strawmanning them. No, they're strawmanning us. Because we characterize in our first speech that this rise promotes self-responsibility, i.e. you are the person at fault for everything that happens. What this means is that you blame yourself and you believe that you are the one who can solve this, that you don't talk to others because you firstly don't believe that they can help you, and secondly that they should help you because this is your responsibility, the thing you should be working on. Thus they don't get any of those benefits from your friends noticing your problems because you don't want them to notice, because you want to hide it and you want to help yourself. Thus they don't get those things. And the third reason you opt out is the inherent situation where you can't do both. We explained that sometimes you pay a lot of money for a moonstone and you can't also get the medication, and when you opt to get that moonstone, then you don't get that medication. You have inherently opted out of the system. Thus, the bottom line here is simple. Therapy is always going to work, no matter how simple your situation is. However, there is a ceiling for which yoga cannot help you anymore. And when you hit that ceiling, in there are the most negative impacts realized. We have told you this from the first speech. Let's talk about the most important people in this debate, the ones suffering the most. And we say it's really offensive when they say that these people are dumb for believing these medicines and alternative options. Because it's not that they are dumb, but we characterize them that they are not rational actors. When faced with incredible pain, when faced with depression and faced with suffering, anything that can help, anything that promises to help, you are willing to give a shot to. We tell you that this is the most crucial part of this debate. Firstly, because of the snowball effect that they never respond to, i.e. that starting from yoga, you actually move on to other parts of this, eventually completely distrusting the system because you go step by step trying anything that helps, anything that promises to be better. And secondly, that you feel incredibly guilty because of the stigma. When you blame yourself for your situation and the situation doesn't get better because often these videos don't help you when you're in the deepest depths of depression, and they tell you that you should be able to help yourself, you feel incredibly guilty and your situation worsens even more because you think you are useless. None of this has ever been rebutted on their side, right? When the biggest impact that they claim is that you are more confident in your WSDC speech, but we tell you can legitimately handle your depression because you are more likely to opt into the best systems that legitimately help you, we clearly win this debate because debating is cool, but it's not as important as your mental health, right? Lastly, we tell you that the physical part is also extremely important because this is a spectrum, as they say, and at one end of the spectrum, people are dying. There are a lot of reasons. First, because sometimes you have legitimately bad medication, i.e. scammers are really motivated to not sell good things or aren't even capable of selling good things. They never respond to this analysis, right? But also because there's just no access to it anymore. I tell you very simply that even in situations where it does possibly to a certain extent work, they have never proved why it's going to work better than the medication or things that we offer. Thus, the worst case that we have is that these two things are completely equal, but in most cases in our world, it's going to be far better, right? And when people are suffering on a physical health standard, we can legitimately help them so much more than they ever legitimately can. For all of these reasons, we win this debate because the most vulnerable people are helped, and every one of us also gets help if they need it, if they ask for it, and they're always more likely to ask for it in our world. I'm so proud.